doing here today is what I call a rosemary ribeye steak. Why I call it a rosemary ribeye steak is because the rosemary one kicks it in. First, what I do is I use the ground seasoned salt, the sea salt, excuse me. It's always the best. And I do this first because it soaks into the meat. And I use quite a little bit because it really gives a lot of flavor. We're not putting a whole bunch of spices on it. And the same with the ground pepper. I'll do this first. Use lots of it because we usually let it sit for about 2 hours before we put it on the grill, and it really absorbs the rosemary, the seasoning, and also we're going to be putting olive oil on it. So I press it with a spoon, and the sea salt immediately absorbs into the meat. Now the next thing I'm going to do on this side is I'm going to turn it over and do the same thing before I put the rosemary and olive oil into it. So these are really nice cuts here. Real flavorful. So I'm going to do the same thing I did on the other side with the sea salt. Which, by the way, sea salt is what you need to use. You can't use the iodized. I mean, this is just the only way to go with these steaks. And they're such large cuts of meat. The big salt just goes right into it and just really gives it a lot of flavor. Sometimes your arms get tired doing it, but it's worth it. So now I'm going with the pepper again. Now on the other side, the seasonings have probably pretty much are good as far as getting into the meat. So I'm going to flip them back over again after I rub the salt and pepper in a little bit. And you don't want to poke it. A lot of people poke their meat, say they need to get to do that, but you don't need to do it. It's not necessary. So I'm going to flip it back to where we were, and then I'm going to do my olive oil. And not a whole lot, but just enough to coat the meat before I add the rosemary. And there we go with the olive oil. Okay, there's olive oil for there. And then once again, I'm going to generously make sure the olive oil's all over each side of the cuts of meat. And then I'm going to add the rosemary, which is very fresh, by the way. I just picked it. Make sure I have enough here. And then once again, I will do my little spoon trick. Make sure the rosemary's somewhat embedded with the oil before I flip these things again. So now that looks great, doesn't it? So anyways, we're flipping for our final finale here, and this is very simple and it doesn't take long. The flavor is just incredible. So here I go with my olive oil again. And again, my usual spoon press. Make sure it's even. It's almost like putting on suntan lotion. So there you have that. And then the last thing is, of course, the rosemary, which I think I cut it pretty close, but I think I have enough. It's real fresh, so it's got a real, I mean, you can probably smell this across the room right now, so I think we're good on the rosemary. Once again, I'll press this in. Just like that. And there you have it. 10 minutes worth of prep. Once it's barbecued, it'll be awesome. Okay, so now that our steaks have been in the fridge for 2 hours, we're ready to put them on the grill. And what we're going to do is we're going to low grill them because they are thick and they're very meaty. So I'm going to cook them. It's a small grill, so it's hard to control the flame. So I'm actually going to cook them on the top. And they're so thick, what I'm going to do is you don't want to turn your meat too much on the grill. So I'm going to try and keep it as low as I can and slow as I can and just grill them just like that. And I'm going to close the lid and check on them like every 5 to 10 minutes. Because they are so thick, what I've learned is you don't want to turn your meat too much. You want to cook it as long as you can. Ideally, cook it on one side, flip it over, cook it then, and then it's a done deal. Now, sometimes you tend to get flare-ups because you do have the oil on your meat, which you got to watch. That's why I chose to go on the higher level, because this small grill is hard to control. So we're going to go ahead and close this and check on them in about 15 minutes. Okay, we've had the steaks on one side probably close to 15 or 20 minutes, so I think it's time to turn them. We're going to give it a shot, see how they look. And they are lush. That one's good, and these ones good. You don't want to burn them, but what I'm seeing right now though, I probably want a little more char, so I may have to turn them one more time, but for the most part they're going to be really tender and really tasty. As you can see, the rosemary is still on the meat and the oil and everything's absorbed. So we'll check back in another 15 minutes, see where we're at. Yeah, I come from the old school where I literally cut to make sure everybody's happy, so that's what I'm going to do. A lot of good barbecuers know when it's done, but this is going to be a test here, because we're looking at medium rare, and I think that's where we need to be. And this big old monster here is also medium rare. So we're done, basically. And this one, just for grins, I'll cut it, but I can tell it's done. That's a little more well done. But that's basically it. I'm going to turn this thing off and we're going to enjoy this. So as you can see, this is the result of our success. We've got good food, good wine, good friends, and we're ready to enjoy. So very simple, very tasteful, and hope you can enjoy this as well as yourself. Thank you very much.